Okay. Welcome to LaGuardia Community College's 2022 Asian American Pacific Islander celebration. This session is a virtual reading and workshop with writer and scholar Rajiv Mohabir. For the best viewing experience, please grab a pen and some paper, turn on your camera so it's easier to engage, use speaker view, remain muted until prompted to answer. Feel free to ask questions using the chat feature at any time. Be respectful of others. And please note that this event is being recorded and will be archived with the LaGuardia and Wagner archives. I want to say a special thank you to all who made this celebration possible. I'm the chair of the Asian American Pacific Islander Committee, and we have committee members from across the colleges, from different departments, different offices, and we've been planning since September the month-long series of programs. So I'll tell you more about the programs at the end of the session, but I really hope that you will attend and that I'll see you at some of them. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and we're going to begin with some student reflections. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so we are going to start with Lakshmi Duki. And Lakshmi is an international student from Guyana. She's currently pursuing an associate's degree in English and hopes to complete her bachelor's at Queen's College. Duki aspires to work in higher education, in administration or teaching, to develop programs and projects that support disadvantaged students at community colleges. She is Phi Theta Kappa chapter president at LaGuardia, an alumni of LaGuardia's President Society, and a former primary school teacher. Last year, she received the Lenore A. Beakey Award from the English department and has been selected to be part of the 2022 All New York academic team. Duki will offer a reflection titled Retracing My Indo-Guyanese Migration Story Across Generations, which was published in last year's issue of LaGuardia's Asian American Voices Journal. I will now pass it over to Duki.
Thank you so much, Professor. Hi guys, I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be sharing a few paragraphs from the piece I wrote. Just a tiny backstory on it. Well, not even a backstory. Elena, whose name you're going to hear, she's my great-great-grandmother. She, along with her son, were the first Dukis to migrate to the then British Guyana. They were indentured servants. They came from India to work on the sugar plantation. And so whenever I say Elena, she's who I'm referring to. Starting over is difficult for anyone, let alone a single mother in a new world with a strange language. Working in a man's world, ankle deep in mud, cutting and carrying sugarcane is not the fairy tale a woman dreams of. But it was Elena's reality. She worked long hours for very little, but she kept her son healthy and happy. Elena's sacrifices are the reasons I have a family, yet my father tells a different story of his family. He speaks of the glory of his grandfather, Old Duki, the man responsible for the development of our family. He's seen as the founding father and the breadwinner. It is as if his mother, Elena, had never existed. Traditions set the balance of a man and a woman's place in the family, and society ensures that it stays that way. It seems impossible to these power-hungry men that a woman is capable of navigating her own life and protecting her family. Elena's hard work and sacrifices became a myth forgotten by my generation because women in my family were seen mainly as homemakers and mothers. Most got married between the ages of 16 and 28, but no one seemed to object. It became the norm. However, my mother's family was different. She grew up in a home where her mother, a laborer, was the keeper of happiness and progress. She learned at an early age that you have to work to achieve the things you want in life. My mother ensured that no matter the circumstances, her children were given the best opportunities. She always believed that we have the power to shape our own destinies. So after 4 generations of Dukis living in Guyana, my older sister was the first female to work a formal job. She started a revolution, one that I would soon follow. But where did I fit in this collage of unique women? Growing up, I've always been me, a clumsy combination of what ifs and maybe, challenging everything around and within me. I never quite understood why society's expectation of me was to get married. I wanted to be remembered for more than just a well-kept wife. I wanted to be me. So like the moon, eager to catch the sun, not even traditions could stop me. That is a short piece, and I chose it because it looked at women from my father's side of the family, starting from the beginning. It looked at the grandmother, my mother, and my sister and me, and yeah, that's what I selected.
Thank you, Duki, for that powerful offering. Our second student presenter is Devon Watkins. Devon is an English major whose career goal is to be a screenwriter. Graduating this semester with a 3.8 GPA, Devon will be transferring to SUNY Buffalo. Before beginning his career as a professional screenwriter, his goal is to be an elementary school teacher. Devon will offer a response to Mohabir's poem, Ode to Richmond Hill, which we studied in our English 295 World Literature and English course. I now turn to Devon.
Hi, everyone. I hope my background isn't too noisy because my neighbors are playing a lot of music, but yeah. So hi, everyone. Hi, Mohabir and everybody. I'm a shy person, so I hope that doesn't play into anything like that. But yeah, I'm gonna read it now. After reading Mohabir's Ode to Richmond Hill, I was able to understand more precisely how Caribbean identities constantly change over time and the concept of diaspora. I noticed that Mohabir combined both Indo-Caribbean and New York's culture all throughout this poem, showing the ways in which Indo-Caribbean culture and people are embedded in the New York City landscape. The poem takes place in Richmond Hill, a part of Queens with a large Indo-Caribbean population and a community that has been emerging since the 1970s. We see this at the very beginning of the poem where it says, a taxi speeds by blaring Chutney remix, Kasibani, and you remember your auntie dropping her rum at auntie's party to jump up. In these lines, the speeding taxi played a specific form of Indian Caribbean music, chutney, brings back memories for the speaker, memories of his grandmother and aunt partying, which shows how Indo-Caribbean culture has expanded into spaces like New York. In the poem, Ode to Richmond Hill, he points to this awareness regarding cultural identity being different from his descendants when he says, from India, you are a forgery that will one day burn not on a pride, but in an incinerator, not on a riverbank, but in a crematorium. I admire this line because it reflects one of the major themes for this poem, which is becoming aware of the transformation of culture over generations and geographic locations. These lines speak about Hindu death rituals in which bodies are cremated instead of buried. The speaker knows he won't have the same experience compared to that of his ancestors. He uses words like pride, riverbank to shed light on the death rituals and traditions created and used by descendants that lived in India and Guyana, but also to show an Indo-Caribbean person like him probably won't encounter this in the U.S. Just like Mohabir, I sometimes think about my hybrid culture and how my African and Jamaican ancestors might have lived their lives. The natural ways in which they cope with their everyday lives and differences compared to the modern day. Seeing how African and Jamaican communities today exist in boroughs throughout New York, I realized how the current reality connects to Mohabir's perspective of cultural evolution. The ways in which Mohabir connects his memories and his self-perception makes me enjoy reading his works, whether it's from this poem or his book, The Taxidermist's Cut. He uses descriptive writing to express certain topics that may connect to people like me who come from a family of various cultural backgrounds. Mohabir's work encourages us to contrast our cultural identity to our surroundings and to that of previous generations, showing once again how cultures are constantly changing over time. That's it.
Thank you, Devon, for presenting that insightful reading and for connecting it to your own life and identity. Now I have the pleasure of
Thank you so
introducing
much.
our special guest, Rajiv Mohabir. Mohabir is the author of 3 collections of poetry, including Cutlish, published by Four Way Books, which was released in September 2021. He also authored the memoir Antiman, which was published by Restless Books in June 2021. As a translator, his version of I Even Regret Night, Holy Songs of Demerara, which was published by Kaya in 2019, won the Harold Morton Landom Translation Award from the Academy of American Poets in 2020. He teaches in the MFA program at Emerson College and lives in the Boston area. Please join me in welcoming award-winning writer Rajiv Mohabir.
Thank you so much, Anita, for that introduction. It was so lovely to be introduced by you always. And thank you, Devan and Lakshmi, for sharing your thoughts and your writings about your own lives and about my work too. Like, it's just so lovely to be here tonight. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to start off by reading a selection from Antiman. And then after that, I'm going to jump into a kind of writing prompt that I hope you all participate in to get your engagement up and to really chat with one another. And then I will finish with a reading from the Taxidermist Cut. So the first part that I'm going to read from is from the memoir Antiman, and it's called Islamophobic Misreadings, Some Queens Definitions. So I wrote this when I lived in Queens. I lived in Jackson Heights, and I was going to school at Queens College. So I would take the 7 train to the 34 bus and go down all the way to Casino Boulevard. And at this time, it was, 2010. So like 9 years away from September 11th. And, I had been racially profiled as being, somebody that I'm not. Although I do come from a family that is of mixed religion. So I have relatives that are Hindus, who are Christians, and who are Muslim. I actually have a lot of atheist relatives, as well as some Sri Lankan Buddhist relatives too. So, this is about being constantly misread in spaces, and where Islamophobia is still rampant in our world. I want to try. I'm going to read some of these, and I'm going to transition into thinking about like ways that brown folks have included me in their circles too. So I'll read several Islamophobic misreadings, some Queen's definitions. Islamophobia, noun, from Islam, Arabic, meaning surrender to the will of God. Phobia, Greek, meaning an irrational fear. Islamophobia is irrational fear prejudiced against, hatred for Islam or Muslims, a contemptuous way of viewing Islam or Muslims that existed before the Crusades, endured past World War II, and was reimagined in country songs after the Twin Towers fell on September 11th, 2001. Misreading, noun, from mis, Old French, prefix to denote wrongness. Reading, Old English, redan, to advise or interpret. Misreading is the basing of judgment of a person on preconceived notions. Literally, to read incorrectly, a way of racially profiling brown bodies. Islamophobic misreading is when a parent of one of your former students approaches you outside of the schoolyard and emulates their version of what Arabic sounds like to them, and talks to you in Ecuadorian Spanish, saying, Mahala Mahama, pareces uno de los hombres del 11 de septiembre que atacaron los Torres. She laughs and tells your friend standing next to you not to translate. She continues, para esto tú ves gordo. You catch gordo, and you ask your friend to translate. She says, some people are so ignorant. She said you look like one of the bombers from September 11th, and she asked me not to tell you. You say, and she called me fat. Islamophobic misreading is outside on the cul-de-sac in Chulioda, Florida. The white neighbor woman asks your sister, what will God think about a brown girl with Islamic writing on her arm? Your sister replies, first of all, there's no such thing as Islamic writing, and this is Hindi. And I'm pretty sure that God loves this little brown girl with or without tattoos. Islamophobic misreading is a Facebook post on a photo of you with a beard. Comments from a high school classmate. Wow, that beard puts the Arabs over here to shame. Rajiv, you remind me of a character from a movie. It might be Aladdin or another Disney movie. The facial expression is hilarious. I can't place it yet, but it will come to me. Islamophobic misreading is when you are an ESL teacher and your assistant principal says that he wants the newcomer hijabi girl to remain in your class because you may speak Islam and that you will know how to handle these kinds of parents. When you explain that you don't know any spoken Islam and that your Arabic is limited to only a couple of phrases from Bollywood movies, he says that any commonality is sufficient. At testing time, when the students are required to take their high stakes tests, even though they've been in the country less than a year, he says that the student took the test with the Egyptian Arabic speaker hired by the district as a translator. He noticed that the student did not write in hieroglyphics, but wrote in normal language of English letters in what he called fucked up phonetics. Islamophobic misreading is when the Dominican man working at the restaurant called Caridad says to you, why you have a beard? ¿No tienes calor? Where are you from? You answer one at a time. I just like it. Yeah, I get hot, but I'm from Florida. I'm of Indian descent. Oh, India. You're trying to look like a real Indian. Well, I'm not sure what you mean. You should shave your beard. You're a handsome guy. You are Muslim, right? You don't want to look too Muslim. Well, actually, no, I'm not Muslim, but oh, so you're telling me that I can trust you? He laughs at this for a loud 30 seconds. Islamophobic is when you are singing your Aji song and the words Ultan Sultan. The words are Ultan Sultan. You sing for your aunts and uncles, and your father laughs and says to his brothers and sisters, they must have been Fulla with names like Ultan and Sultan, unaware that his Muslim brother-in-law is sitting right there. Fulla or Fullaman is the Caribbean Bhojpuri word for the Hindi Musliman or Muslim. Your father profusely apologizes to your uncle and says, it's too bad you think our relationship is so fragile that I wouldn't be able to heal from the wound of your comment. When he leaves, the whole family starts laughing. Let's see. Islamophobic misreading is when a friend hears you say, I am from Guyana, and says, you can't say you're from Guyana. You were born in London. You feel it's a bit imperialistic for a white person to tell you so definitively what you are and where you're from. Your friend sometimes tells others about how untraditional your family is. Your friend has never had to explain a long history for people to understand where he's from. He simply has to say, my family is from Michigan before we moved to Florida. You have to say, I was born in London. My parents are from South America, but we are actually of South Asian descent. But you cut corners by saying things like, I am South Asian, I am Indian, I'm Guyanese. These answers change when you talk to different people. If the person is South Asian, you say, I'm Guyanese. When you talk to a white person, you say, I am Indian, to avoid their questions. Islamophobic misreading is President Obama refusing to go to the Swarna Mandir, the Golden Temple in Amritsar, because he didn't want people to see him covering his head like a Muslim. And so I just wanted to jump around to those definitional kind of, or definition kind of poems so that we have that in the air. for our writing prompt. But I want to end this first portion of my reading by the other part of this, which is called Brown inclusion, some Queen's definitions, where Brown folks have like included me into their communities. Okay, Brown inclusion is stumbling with Sarah toward a bar, through the crowd accumulating on 73rd Street, after reading through poetry submissions to the literary magazine you edit, the Ozone Park Journal. You met in your MFA program and connected over astrology and your love for dive bars. South Asian men and women are crowded outside the wooden doors, dressed in colorful shalwar kameez, saris, kurtas, and pajamas, watching a musical group set up tabla and microphones on a small makeshift stage wreathed in police tape. Sarah asks, "What's going on?" Since you had just been talking about the pomp and the glory of Jackson Heights in festival season, you feel compelled to answer. You turn to the bearded man on your right, just as the tabla starts introducing the tala. The man wears a short sleeve button down with a pair of khaki slacks. "Yahan kya ho raha hai?" you ask in Hindi. "What's happening here?" "Nava barsho," he replies in Bangla. Behind you, 3 white men exit the last Irish bar in the neighborhood raucously, disturbing the street celebration and with swearing and drunkenness. "What's that?" you ask again in Hindi. "Bengali New Year. These people are Hindus," he answers laughingly in Urdu. It occurs to you that he read you as Muslim, and you hear and that your Hindi wasn't Hindi, but the spoken form of it, which is simultaneously Urdu and Hindi. Brown inclusion is the 84-year-old Trinidadian uncle with the henna red hair in Flushing Meadows Park in Queens, whom you meet at the Jose reenactment, and who approaches you out of the crowd of 100 and talks to you about Islam and its true meaning. Islam is not a violent religion. People make bad choices. You must contact Preetha for my number, and I will tell you everything that I learned. The Quran says that men and women are equal. It never says that women are less. But today, everyone is mixed up. So as you might see, I've jumped back and forth around these 2 chapters. And to let you know a little bit about kind of like the writing behind it and what I did, was that I wanted to do an experiment. When I lived in Queens and I was an MFA student, I was being misread in all of these places, and people were telling me who I was and what I looked like and assuming things about me. And so what I did was I grew out a beard that I did not cut for months. So my beard got really, really full, like really, really big. And I kept a notebook of any time anyone said something to me, whether it was Islamophobic or racist, or if it was like inclusive and like calling me as one of their own. And because I wanted to show a kind of brown solidarity that I felt with people around me. And it was a challenging thing to do in New York and to be there. And so it made me start to think that, New York is probably the most metropolitan place in the world. Like, I mean, Queens itself is the most diverse place in the whole entire globe. Which is kind of magical, that it's easy for us in our bodies to be misread by people, right? For people to think of us as being something that we're not. So I want to kind of share with you right now, I'm going to share my screen. I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to draft and respond to this question. And then after the response, I'm going to ask for people to volunteer, because I would love to get to know your energy, to feel your words in the room too. And so the thing that I'm going to ask you to write is, I want you to think of a time when someone defined you. Who defined you and as what? Were you told that you were not X, Y, or Z enough? Like, for example, oh, you're not Indian enough, or oh, you're not Jamaican enough, or oh, like you've come to the United States, you don't seem like you're really African, are you? This kind of thing. Were you told that you were not a real Indian? That's another example from my life. Were you misgendered? Did it hurt you? What was your reaction? Write briefly about how you felt when someone else told you who you were, instead of you having agency in defining yourself. So I want you to recall back to this time that this has happened to you. And I want you to quickly write down, a thing. And it can take the form of any kind of form you want. It could look like an essay. It could look like notes. It could look like a poem. You can answer the questions directly, or you can come at it from a slant, right? What does this remind you of? Use this as like a jumping off point to draft something that we will quickly have a conversation about. So I'll set my alarm for 5 minutes. Anita, you think that's enough time? Make it 7? What do you think?
I think 5 is good.
Great. I will set my alarm for 5 minutes and then I will call us back. So feel free to mute yourselves, or turn off your camera if you want to, but leave it on if you want as well, and draft. And the timer begins now.
Where will we write? In the chat?
No, please, on a piece of
write on paper. Okay, got it.
On paper, yeah. Great. Well, thank you. And actually, Alex, this is a good transition. Like what you just said is a good transition into the second part of my reading. So I really thank you for your comments and thank you for sharing. Alex and Alice and Devon Devon and Suleiman, thank you all so much for lending us your energy tonight. I really appreciate it. And so to jump off of what Alex was saying about like how being called from the outside and like speaking in these kind of like shortcuts, like telling people, yeah, I'm an American, that's the kind of thing. When I was younger, growing up in Florida, my mom used to always say, oh, we're East Indian. And so that's what I would say to people, oh, I'm East Indian, until I met like people from South Asia and like more recent migrants from South Asia. They're like, you're not East Indian. You're not. Like, you're like fictitious or you're fake. You're like, that expression, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think of it as kind of like a coyote pretending to be a wolf. Because on the East Coast, there used to be like coyotes, and coyotes were, there used to be wolves. And as wolves were hunted into extinction, coyotes came and took over the ecological niche that the wolves lived in. And so this next poem is from the title poem of The Taxidermist's Cut. And it's called, literally, The Taxidermist's Cut. And I use a lot of vocabulary and words from several manuals on taxidermy. So just bear with me. It's going to be, there's going to be a lot. Just catch what you can. And then in the Q&A, we can talk about it if you want. The Taxidermist's Cut. In the taxidermist's tool belt, pinking irons, hand vise, knife, bondo, fleshing beam, skinning table, razor. From the book, Practical Taxidermy. And the learner, having got out the whole of the knives and whetstone, may proceed. Your great-grandparents traveled Kalapani from India to South America. It tries to erase you still, though you cannot hide brown skin and burnt cumin in Chuliota, where active members of the clan rally against sand ends and faggots. The name Ikonlakhachi means river of mounds in Seminole, which may mean runaway in Spanish. Florida's black water flows northward. When you come here, you come to be outside of brown and unbrown. On the banks of the river, the wet sand keeps a record of all who pass. Walking south against the flow, away from the St. John's River, stamps of cannid footprints trail yours. You are being stalked. Canis latrans, the Latin name for coyotes, are new to Florida. Their needs in habitat and diet are non-specific, and there is reduced competition in the scrubland. They adapt easily, experts at illusion. Their pelts hang by the dozens at the Sanford flea markets, hated for being exotic, invasive, and competition for jobs. Most white folks see coyotes as wolves, but you are not from the subcontinent, and you don't descend from first-wave doctors and lawyers. but from illiterate farmers who were once slaves in the sugarcane fields for the East India Company. Your own country cannot be here. You limb night. Erasure. Dress the animal in the field. With your hands, reach into the thoracic cavity and pull the intestines, stomach, liver, the kidneys, lungs. Blood will stain the grass. Leave the entrails for crows. Lay the coyote on the skinning table. Cut from the anus to the top of his shoulders. Look into his eyes. You can take a Christian name to blend into the First Baptist Church, though they may still kick you out, the coyote in the hen house, for the dreams that they have of people like you. The youth leader looks at your summer coat and laughs. I wouldn't see you, but your eyes are so big and your teeth are so white. At night, they see your teeth grinning a satanic grin. Watch the elders magnify the Lord. Every time you speak, they hear a new hell. Along the house's stucco, the exoskeletons cling, cut through in a single slice, an echo without being seen. All about, air clouds with cicada song. You have never seen one up close, still invisible. Their wings a web of veins leading into music. Their eyes are so large, they can bury themselves in earth for 17 years. Know instinctually when the threat is a memory. Their wings are harps. Place the shell in your palm. A queer flutter knocks about your ribs. Erasure. Make an incision at the front leg, just below the foot pad. Cut up to the elbow along where fur changes from tawny to white. This is a natural line to follow. When the meat is exposed, cut the hide away from the muscle in all four legs. Then connect the four-leg knife trail to the shoulder cut. In this way, you have removed the skin, separating it from the legs. You may start on the back. Do with the tail as you did with the feet. All points lead back to the anus. From home taxidermy and pleasure, from home taxidermy for pleasure and profit. The learner is apt to come to grief. You spend your life eating darkness. With the first cut across the pubis and lower belly, a murder of crows lifts into cloud on purple feathers. Leave a slug trail of spit beetle nut red. Chew. Spit blood on the sidewalk. You always want to refashion yourself into some other self. You always wanted a pair of your own bangles. These musical instruments are Creole teeth marked with flowers. You want to pull out all of your teeth. With gold forceps forged from your mother's bangles, you extract a map of India or its shadow. With a razor, cut against the commandments of every book. Remember not to cut through more skin than is necessary, as you will have to sew up the holes you make along the way. Remember kneeling before the white man with his plastic scrotum hanging from his pickup. He didn't say when and laughed. But before you slip his underwear around his ankles, you must prove loyalty to him, then to the US. First, you must swallow a minnow whole, then jump from a bridge on Snow Hill Road. When you finish, you must swear never to eat curry and dal with your fingers. Take off your skin right here. Dress yourself for the field. Pull out your entrails and stuff your yellow belly with coals. Pick up a razor. It sounds like erasure. Dressed for the first time you cut yourself. Blood erupts. New flesh to grow between these banks of skin. A river first, then young earth without a secret. It's raining outside. Your parents are at Bible study, leaving you alone with the devil inside. Your clothes are strewn about the floor. Rain ricochets drops through the window pane. Your drops drone and soar from the open window as cicadas. Inside you reign. You are a forgery, not a wolf, not an Indian, not a son. The first time you drag that razor down your wrists and forearms, the rubies grow veined wings, tymbals. Large eyes push through the cut. Despite the dark pools collecting at the edge of the table, despite the darkness of suffocation, a steady flutter. Cut along the large intestine, through the diaphragm, and along the rib cage. It cracks as it opens. Lay the hide when the flesh is removed. Wash the blood and cholesterol into the river. Take the brown skin with the coat intact. It can erase you easily, though it too is brown. Its brown changes from yellow-gray to red to tawny. Against the dawn, who can make out the clear outline of the forest? Cover your own skin with the hide that does not hide. Place your arms and legs in the empty pelt and sew yourself up. Before running into the woods, catch a dusk calling or lyric cicada. You released them decades ago, and now they cling to sentinel oak bark. Keep caged in your closed teeth. It's flitting, though it tickle your tongue. Against the sun falling or rising, it will drone and hum and buzz. On the forest line, a coyote's silhouette sings a cicada song. Whew. That was a long poem and a lot of things inside that poem. I'm going to read to you, as we say, as I end the reading portion of tonight, a poem called Amyotis lucifugus, and that is a Latin name for the small brown bat. And this is kind of like a love poem, and hopefully it leaves us in a happier space than that last poem. Myotis lucifugus. Fear gallops from your open mouth, a smoke with webbed wings, the wick of a candle too long, or a fire chewing scrub forest. You reached out for me once, in a series of pulses. Now, only silence throbs. A dusk release of brown bodies from the bat house by Lake Alice huddles here, a feral cloud. A red-shouldered hawk perches on the railing, looking back. Invite me back inside to burn down the whole forest again. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight and for participating. I'm excited to move on to our question and answer portion of this evening.
I'm so sorry, sir. I really need to leave at 7 promptly, but this was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. It was great.
Oh, I can't see who's speaking. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's Kenny. Kenny, I know my room's a little dark. But
okay, great. Thank you so much.
I really need to run, but it was fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you. Take good care.
Thank you, Rajiv. So we'll start with questions from the audience. Would you like them to put in the chat or unmute themselves? Both, whichever one they like.
Oh yeah, unmuting sounds great. And to get the energy of the voice in the room is great. Sure. If that's okay with you all. Okay,
I see Suleiman's hand up. So you want to start us off?
Yes, I do want to start off. Your book, The Tremors That You Cut, has a lot of symbolism, especially nature. I was wondering what inspired you to use so much nature and so much time in the human body and the animal's body to get to your point in describing the specific detail or the specific scene in one stanza or one line. It's pretty curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, I grew up mostly in Central Florida, and it was before Orlando was like the urban sprawl that it is. I grew up in the middle of a forest, really. My parents, when we came to Florida from New York, they wanted us to be like, my dad wanted us to live in a jungle like he did in Guyana. He was from Crowwood Creek, so like they would go into the forest all the time. And so when I was growing up, I was outside in the middle of the bush all of the time. And when I would get good grades from school, my parents would give us or give me these like nature guides. And so I probably had bookshelves of nature guides. My dad worked in a store that sold books about Florida. And so the first things that I would do is, or like what I would do in summer vacation or any kind of holiday was I would be outside and I would like look for places where I could find animals. So I learned how to track deer. I would come up on like skeletons of animals. I would be able to like, identify different bird species and that kind of thing. And so that was like part of my history, like growing up with like very closely with the natural world in Florida. But it wasn't until, I was in a creative writing workshop where we had to use what Kamiko Han, the professor, said was outside material. And so in Jackson Heights, and I don't know if they still do this. Last time I was there, I didn't see this, but people would come outside with their like carts, and on their carts, they would have these old books for sale. And you buy like one book for $1. I found a manual for upland bird taxidermy. And at the time I was vegetarian. And I was like, this seems like so weird and like so outside of my own thinking that I'm going to take this book and I'm going to use it for poetry. And so I would go into the book and I would come up, I would find words and phrases and ideas that were so not in my vocabulary and not in like, that I found also to be interestingly textured. And I would excerpt those and write poems based on that. And it would like, I would jump into this very particular time of my life. The Taxidermist Cut very much is about that time of my life where I was young in Florida, and learning about sexuality, my own sexuality, and then like also like thinking through how I identified culturally in this place that was like, I think there were not very many folks of color around. So, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jack?
Hey, how are you? I was just wondering what your first paid writing opportunity was, because like it's obvious that your writing's extremely personal and means more to you than that, but at the same time, I'm just curious as to how it translated into a career, because I'm interested in writing. It seems like it's difficult to reach that place, and I was just wondering how you got started with that.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, I have to be completely transparent. I don't make my living off of my writing. I make a living off of my teaching. And so, one of the good things about being a poet is that like, I'm able to teach poetry, because like to be a poet, it's like for every like one line of of a poem that you've read or that you write, you've probably read like 5 different books, per line. So like, it's hard to think of what that really is. But I remember the first time I was paid for a poem, getting a check in the mail for like $100, and being like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I'm being paid for this writing. But I will say that there are people who can make their living off of writing prose, and some people and fewer people that do it off of poetry, but that's few and far between. So when I think and encourage people to write, I'm always like, well, what is your side hustle? What is the other thing that you're willing to do in order to like feed your writing? That could be, it could be like, actually, I am working at Starbucks because, or, I had a friend that actually, when I asked him this, he's like, I work at a Starbucks. When I come home, I don't have to think about work. What I do is I get to writing. And at this point, he's written 3 or 4 novels. that he sold for like pretty decent money, you know? And so he then has like made the transition from, you know, doing that to teaching as a day job. And so that's another thing that can happen. For me, you know, to see money and royalties and that kind of thing from books of poems is harder to do than for the memoir. So I don't know if that is like a little disillusioning. I hope it's not, because like writing is absolutely worth the life force that you put into it.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought you might say, something along those lines. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I saw Sarah Lise had her hand up, and then we'll have Brenda and then Devon.
Oh yeah, I had my hand up. There. So what I wanted to ask, this is specifically to your memoir that you wrote. So in your beginning author's note, I had a question, like, do you think your work brought some sort of justice or even given a voice to your ancestors, specifically to your Aji?
Thank you for this question. Oh my God. So I don't know, you know what I mean? I go back and forth. I wrestle this question always. Like, is my Aji, would she be angry that I like shamed the family in this way? Even though like I've held her words up to be very, very dear to me. I'll tell you a weird story. How about that as an answer? So I was like, you know, it was the day that the final edits of the book was due to the publisher. The last day I could have been like, I call this off. I don't want to do this. Like, here's your advance back. I'm pulling and withdrawing. You know, it was like the last day that I could do that. And I'd finally gone through with a fine tooth comb, the memoir. And I was like, you know, the night before I was like, you know, Aji, can you please let me know if this is the right thing? You know, she's passed away and who knows, like, do I believe in God? I don't know. Do I believe in ancestors, like having power over us? Like, yes, I do. And no, I don't. And yes, I do. So I'm really conflicted about this. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I wake up early in the morning to get into my writing routine. And I sit down at my computer. And as I pull up the PDF of the manuscript to look it over and to just like say a little prayer before I send it off, my iTunes turns on. And it's a recording of my grandmother singing this prayer. It's I don't know if you know, it's but it goes Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva. So it's like, you are my mother and my father. It's just like a blessing. One of the first prayers that my grandmother taught me, and I had a recording of it, and it just played on my computer. And I was like, I got chills. I was like, okay, then this is. I feel like I'm doing something right. I'm literally hearing the voice of my ancestor that's singing a blessing. Like after Aarti, after puja, it's the last prayer that my family would sing, right? And it's this kind of finality, you know. And I sent it off, and I can't believe that was a truth of this story. So that's what my hope is, you know. And it's surprising. It's surprising to know people who have reached out to me after reading my memoir. And to be like, oh wow, I read your book. Like, I just was like, oh my God, you read my book? That's wild. So yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you for answering.
Brenda?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
So I was wondering, how did you feel before and after submitting your first piece for publication?
Oh yeah, you know, I was like nervous, and I would check my email every 2 minutes to be like, oh my gosh, are they gonna read it? Are they gonna read it? Are they gonna read it? And no, they didn't. And no, they didn't. And no, they didn't. And I had to wait 6 months before I heard anything. But I will tell you, when I got rejected, because inevitably you get rejected, you know, it hurt and it stung. But one of my writing professors and mentors said to me, you know, you just got to keep sending things out. You just got to keep sending things out. People are going to say no. If one person out of 100 says, you know, that you have, that they'll take your piece, then you're absolutely lucky. But I want to show you something. Submittable I want to show you what it's like. And even now, I've published 5 books, and even now I get rejections. And those rejections don't make me happy, and they really make me doubt still whether or not I should be doing this. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And there's this website called Submittable. And Submittable keeps a record of all of the submissions that you've made. Okay, and so these in the green here, these are all the things that have been accepted. Look at this. That's a lot, right? That looks like a lot. I have 54 results of things that have been accepted for publication from the 10th for over a decade, for 12 years. In 12 years' time, I only have 54 submissions that were accepted. I have a Master of Fine Arts, I have a Master's of English in teaching English as a second language, and I have a PhD in English, okay? So I want you to see how many of my submissions have been declined, okay? I don't show many people this, but look at how many have been declined. And it keeps going. And there's a second page. Look at this. This is the second page. And so I have 169, rejections and 54 acceptances. Now, I'll say to you, that's a very good ratio. And what I mean, Brenda, is that rejection is inevitable. And, it's also designed, the way of the design is abusive. And especially for writers of color, it's hard to break into, the writing scene, because of the gatekeeping, because the writing world is still about 90% white, and it doesn't reflect the actual diversity in the United States. And so, it's a hard thing. But it's absolutely, like I said to Jack, it's definitely worth your time and energy. The writing life is, a worthy pursuit. So I'll say that. I like what Aurelie says in the chat. She says, rejection is redirection. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Aurelie.
Thank you.
So Devon had a question.
Yeah, hi. I have 2 questions on come on, okay. So my first question is how were you able to get your name known, and how were you able to get your name out there and to get your writing published by agencies? And my second question is how do you find time to balance work and writing? I feel like with writers, it's a hard task to do. So balance both of them at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think these questions, could you repeat the first question? I'm so sorry. I had a hard time holding on to it.
How are you able to get your name out there, known for other agencies to accept you or interview you or meet you in person to talk about your writing and stuff?
Okay, great. So getting my name out there, I just made a quick note. So because I'm as forgetful as a chicken. So first of all, getting my name out there was hard to do, and it wasn't something that all of a sudden overnight happened for me. It was a slow and steady chipping away at a large rock of rejection, of getting the book out there, of getting poems out there. So before you publish a book of poems, you have to submit individual poems for publication. And people generally like you to have been published before they publish you. So it seems like it's one of those hard things to do. When you apply for a job and they're like, oh, you need 5 years of experience, but it's an entry-level position, how do you get that job? So the same thing it feels like for writing. It felt Sisyphean. So the impossible task. So for me, getting my name out there was hard. It was a constant struggle, even after I won. So my first book The Taxidermist Cut, won a book award from Four Way Books. And when that book came out, then I started to get more and more notice. After my second book came out, which won the Kundiman Prize, that's when things started to grow exponentially for me. And so it really took that kind of dedication. I also went to the annual conference for writers and writing programs. Excuse me. And I got to know a lot of the people who ran the literary journals, and I became like kind of in community with them. So I joined community spaces like Kundiman, for example, for Asian American poets. Now it's for Asian American writers. And there are all these like different organizations for people to help you out in your writing life. And so what that means is not necessarily that it's going to help you get your name out there, but it'll help you meet people who are doing the same, who are invested in the same things that you are invested in. To be quite honest, I didn't actually think of myself as a writer until after I finished my work as, my coursework as, to teach, to become a teacher in New York City. And so like, I'm like late to the game based on like everybody else around me who had gone into the world of writing. So there's that part of it too. And I think that's going to be different for everyone that you ask. Sometimes it takes a good TikTok and then like your name is out there. Sometimes it's an Instagram post and then that will lead to a book deal. Sometimes you'll meet an agent on Twitter. Because like hashtag ask an agent is like a thing that happens. So those are some ways to get your writing out there. You can win prizes also. Like what kind of books do you like to read? Where are they published? Those are the things, like get on their radars and like submit to their prizes and that kind of thing. Also, to answer the second part of your question about work-writing balance, I think that like when I approach my work, I am there for students, I'm there for folks who need me. But the first thing that I do in the morning is write. Like for 3 hours a morning, for 3 hours a day, I give myself the time and the space. And I'm like, this is my time, this is my space. I'm gonna write, or I'm gonna read something. I'm gonna do something for myself before I do anything else. And then that puts me in a good kind of creative mood because I already feel successful in the day. Even if I write a really shitty poem, like I still feel good about the things that I've done in my life. In that, like today I wrote a good poem. I wrote a poem. I mean, it's not the best poem, it's okay, but it gives me that feeling like, oh yeah, I'm a writer as I go into the next thing that I do. So teaching, let's say, when I was a teacher in New York City, well, it's hard because class started at like 7:15, 7:10 actually. And so like I'm a morning person. I'm not that kind of a morning person where I can get up at 5 and write, or get up at 4 and write. So what I would do is I would keep notes in my phone, or I would write things down in between periods or whatever. And then when I would get home, that would be my 3-hour span. I would decompress, I would have coffee. There's a fast food Chinese place that was next door to my studio in Jackson Heights, that I would go and I would eat like fried scallops and French fries and work on my writing. And that place really nourished my soul. You know what I mean? I was able to decompress, and I've written so many poems in that place. So for me, writing comes first,
So
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. We have a really important question in the chat. Kamlita asks, why did you decide to title your book Anti-Man?
Yeah, I know. It's such a name, huh? Thank you for this question. It's part of my wanting to wrest back the power of that term, anti-man. Anti-man, it's funny because it's like, with the queer folks that I knew who were West Indian, we would use it to call ourselves this, and it's like, wasn't necessarily derogatory, but it was tongue-in-cheek, to be like, oh yeah, anti-man. I like the resonance of it, the kind of way that it locates like a queerness, for brown and black communities in the Caribbean. It's an idea or a way of understanding gender and sexuality that is not based in a kind of queer imperialist or a queer internationalist approach of understanding queerness, which is usually homonormative or heteronormative, where that marriage equality is the thing that you fight for. You own a Pomeranian and you have enough money to buy a studio in the West Village and Chelsea. Like, that's not the kind of queerness that I read as queer. And so Anti-Man does a lot of that destabilizing work for me, in that it points to a kind of queerness that is transgressive. Anti-man literally also being a term that's used for people who are gender creative and gender non-normative in the Caribbean, or in Guyana, I guess. I keep saying the Caribbean, it's Guyanese, let's be real. And Trinidadians know the word, but I don't know if they would use that word. Bulla man is another one that I was considering bulla, or Anti-man. And Anti-man felt like actually that was the thing that I was called by my family member in the title piece. And so the book goes through the ways in which the word has been used to hurt people like me. And it also goes through my own kind of healing from that. And I like it too, because it's my book is pink. It's a real Anti-man color, the book, if I can say that myself. And it makes me proud when I see it. But the weird thing is when people say it. Oh my God, when I'm giving readings and people are oh yeah, and he wrote this book, Adrian, and I'm just kind of look around I hope no one's offended by this. But then, I don't know. I know that a lot of people take issue and exception to the title. I think that maybe it's not a wise thing to do, to name my book this way, but it's one of the creative risks that I've taken here. And I think that with the form of the book, the title is also one of those things that kind of catches your eye and sticks it to you. Because if I were looking at books, and if I were younger, I would look at a title like this and be oh my God, I'm reading that book. You know what I mean? Anti-man? Yeah, that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Solomon had a question.
Hello again. I have a question. Sorry, it came out of my head. What type of motivation do you have for young writers who want to influence and probably change society in the future?
Yeah. Well, people are going to tell you that it's impossible, and don't believe them. I always tell people, what is the weird thing that you love that maybe you're sometimes embarrassed to do? Maybe sometimes people are telling you that it's not what you should be doing. I say do it anyway. Be 100% full-on dork. Be totally geek out on the things that you like to geek out on. You being yourself and allows the people who witness you being yourself to be themselves. So that's one of the ways that I'll answer your question. The other way is that without the poets, without the writers dreaming up new futures, there's no way that in our present cultural matrix that we can envision a life outside of this predatory capitalism that threatens to ruin and destitute not only our lives, but the lives of the entire world. So keep dreaming and keep doing the thing, even when people tell you no. Believe in that internal engine that tells you to go, to do this,
Thank you.
Okay, our last question, Dookie.
So this is just something I've always wanted to know. So my English professors would torture me when we're analyzing poems. All those punctuation, each word, the analysis. So I always wanted to ask a poet, what do those things really mean to you, and how much thought do you put into each full stop? And I think it was the poem about the whale, that you have all of these, the line breaks in between, and how much space do you leave for interpretation from a reader? What do those things mean to you? It's just as a student struggling to interpret those poems.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, because we're like, when we read poems in schools, we're taught to like really dissect them, right? Like we're supposed to like rip them apart and know every last thing about the poem. But I tell you this, most poets couldn't tell you exactly what they're doing because they rely on their intuition. You know, there's the poet Keats who has this like really powerful essay, and it's about what he calls negative capability, that reading a poem includes emotional investment, and that it's okay to sit in that place of not knowing and let the feeling of the poem wash over you. And so that's one thing that I'll say about reading the poem. But I'll tell you what, when I write the poem, all of the punctuation is exactly where the punctuation should be. And I want it to be there. The line breaks are so essential to the poem for me as well. But, you know, in the process of writing the poem, the endings are not where I aim to get. So, for example, when whales are back in New York City, that last like the stanza, I didn't know that that's where the poem was going. And so when the words came to me as I was drafting it out, I was like, oh my gosh, I just discovered something about what this poem wants me to do, or how it wants me to feel, because I feel that poem to be very hopeful, right? And I think that like that's how I would answer this poem, or this question, is that like, you know, sometimes we ask the wrong questions of poems. Like the wrong question in workshop always is, what do you mean? The right question is, how do you feel and why? So, yeah. I mean, not to get you in trouble with your professors, but you know,
cool.
just okay, good. Well, thank you for your question.
So I placed a link to a flyer of the other AAPI events for the month. Please check them out, and I hope to see some of you there. Thank you all for being with us this evening. This has been such an enriching event. Rajiv, thank you so much for sharing your talent, your experience, and for being in community with us today.
Thank you. The pleasure is absolutely mine. It was wonderful to be with you here all and to hear your voices and your thoughts.
Okay. So with that, I say good night, and I will hopefully see some of you tomorrow at our in-person events.